Let me unmute myself. There we go. Hey everyone, my name is Melissa and it is 1 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I just wanted to turn my webcam on really quick just to say hi so you can see my face. I do work for Saltillo and I'm going to be guiding you through today's presentation. And with that, I'm going to turn my webcam off and we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so today's presentation is called Putting Aided Language Input into Practice. And like I said, my name is Melissa. I'm going to be guiding you through today's presentation. A little bit of housekeeping stuff before we get started. You will see a control panel on one side of your screen. If you want to go ahead and shrink or expand that, there's going to be an orange button up at the top, so you can do that on your own. We do have everybody muted for today's presentation, so if you do have a question or a comment, you can go ahead and type that in the chat window below. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and download the materials, which are in the materials section of this control panel. And we also have the ASHA information included in that. So if you are going to be here and participating for ASHA credit, we do have to have the participation form back to us within 15 days, and make sure to include today's date on that form. If you have other questions, there are instructions in that materials section. You also need to make sure you're online for the entire time because we do timestamp it for attendance for ASHA. All right, and while we are going to be talking about an AAC strategy that does pertain to really any sort of AAC system, most of the examples you're going to see today focus exclusively on Saltillo products. Other disclosures that I need to say are that I'm a full-time employee of Saltillo and a member of the following organizations. A little bit more about me. I've been a speech pathologist for over 10 years. I previously was the Saltillo representative out in Washington and Oregon, but now represent Pennsylvania. I hold a clinical doctorate in speech pathology, and in my spare time, I like to spend it with all of these individuals here on the right-hand side. Okay, so I do want to get an idea of who we have here today. So we are going to send out a poll, and if you can just take a second to indicate what role you are. So if you're a parent, a therapist, etc., just let us know, and that gives me an idea who I'm talking to. Okay, give everybody another second to respond. Looks like we have a lot of SLPs, teachers, AAC specialists, wonderful. Okay, cool. Thank you guys for participating. That gives me an idea kind of who we all are. I think the nice thing about communication strategies, especially with AAC, is no matter what our role is, we all can learn the same thing. So as far as our agenda, we are going to talk about aided language input, what it is and how we can use it. We're going to talk about communication partners and specifically what our roles and responsibilities are. Then we're going to talk about how we can start using shared reading as an activity to get started with aided language input. And then at the very end, we're going to put it all into practice. Now, there's a lot of strategies out there that talk about being good communication partners and ways to increase the accuracy and effectiveness of AAC. Arguably, aided language input would be one of the best ones. So if we can learn that one and teach it to our teams, that can be pretty powerful. Now, as far as what aided language input is, it is a research-based strategy. We know that it works through a variety of means, but it's when you as the communication partner are going to be interacting and doing what you normally do with our person using AAC. But in addition to that, you're going to be interacting and highlighting symbols on their system. So you're going to be doing all of that together, and the goal of all of this is to teach language. Now, aided language input has gone through a lot of different name changes, both in research and clinical practice, so you may have heard it called by all of these different names. So aided language stimulation, modeling, augmented language. Just know I may change some of these terms as I'm going through today, but for today's presentation, we're going to consider those all the same strategy. Now, one video I do want to show, it's a nice little intro video that I like to show to teams and really anybody who's just kind of getting a foundation to what aided language input is. And this video was created by Chris Bouguet. He is an excellent AAC specialist in the States, and he does a nice job of just outlining what this strategy is and why it's really important. So we'll take a few minutes and watch this. Wonderful. Okay. So one way to think about this strategy of aided language input is talk and touch AAC to teach AAC. And this is that idea that us as the communication partner and the person using their AAC system is speaking the same language. And what ends up happening is we can start to see language development both from an understanding side, like a receptive language side, and an expressive language side in what they say. And this idea, the same idea applies to how we think about how young children develop language. So Gail Porter came up with this idea. Let me go back one slide. Gail Porter came up with this idea that language in equals language out. So if we think about our young children who are learning language for the first time, we are just talking to them and exposing them to language, and then on their own they become verbal. And this makes sense too, because if we think about how that immersion works, that child who is verbal is getting exposed to language through a variety of means. So not just from their parents, not just from a teacher, but by everybody in their environment. And so it's based on that same idea. And what we want to try to do is take that idea of immersing somebody in their language, whether it be verbal, whether it be with an AAC system. We want to try to apply that same idea to those using AAC to help foster that language development. Okay, so the next few slides, I'm going to throw some numbers out at you. These numbers, I believe, are also in your handout just to refer back to, but just to kind of see what we're working with here. The first one is 4,000 to 6,000, and these are the number of words typically developing children hear per day. So thinking about our verbal kiddos, that's how many they hear per day. So thinking about our people who use AAC, do we think that we're modeling this many words on the device on a daily basis? I'm going to guess probably not, and I would definitely not strive for this as a goal, but it does put it in perspective that, you know, when we think about how typically developing kiddos learn language, trying to mirror that to AAC is quite a task. All right, the next number is 500. These are the number of times a child hears their first word before they say it. So a single word they need to hear at least 500 times before they start to say it. Now on the flip side, if we think about somebody who uses AAC, what we've seen from some of the data is that we need to model a word between 50 to 150 times before they start to use that word on their device independently. So in this data actually came from Gail Van Tatenhove a while back, where she picked a list of vocabulary words, modeled it to individuals who use an AAC system, and that's what she saw, that she had to model a single word between 50 to 150 times before they use that word independently. All right, the next number is 1 year, and this is how long we're immersed in language before we expect to hear a word. But if we think about our individuals with AAC, typically what we find is immediately once we have that device placed or that system in place, we expect them to start using it independently. So we kind of have to start to shift our what we think about and what our goals are going to be, and especially those expectations, because we really want to try to mirror typical language development, and we can't expect to just set a device in front of somebody and walk away and say, hey, you're good. All right, our last number here is 36,500. These are the number of hours a typical 9 to 12-year-old is going to be exposed to or immersed in oral language. So if we take that huge number, it's a lot of hours, and if we think about somebody who might have their AAC system in place, and let's say they're just getting modeled to once or twice a week during their speech therapy session, in order to get that same level of exposure, it's going to take over 700 years to get to that same point. So again, the numbers kind of look overwhelming and daunting, but it really proves the point that it takes a village to learn how to use an AAC system and to make it effective for somebody who's using it. So it really takes all of us to be on board, all of us modeling, and there we can see that language development. Now, there's not an exact rule of thumb as far as how often we should model, but one idea was that for every 5 things set on the device, 4 of them are going to be modeled by a communication partner, and 1 of them is going to be for the person using the system to express themselves. All right, so our next video here is putting this in action, and this is a great example of a communication partner and her client just having a conversation. And it's hard to know what exactly they had planned for the day for their session, but what I really like about it is she's modeling not only what she's saying in a simplified way, but she's also modeling what he may want to say, and she's kind of reading his behavior and his actions and trying to build that into some modeling opportunities. So here we go.
You told me it was okay if I turned on my camera on my iPad. So on my iPad, I turned on my camera.
I turned on camera, iPad.
Okay. Is that okay with you?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Kendall, you told me. You just said you were tired today, huh?
I'm tired.
I wonder why. I have a question. Why are you feeling tired?
I'm tired.
Why are you tired?
Yes.
Yeah, I wonder why you're tired. Let me see. Are you tired because you had too much driving? Was there too much driving today?
Drive.
You drove a lot. So much. You had a big drive to get over here, huh? That was a long drive, right? That's so funny. It took a lot of time.
You happen to be here, right?
Looky here. It took a lot of time to get here, huh? You had to wake up early this morning, huh? Yeah, it took a lot of time. Yeah, you had to get up early in the morning this morning. Yeah.
Morning.
Yeah. So you had to wake up and get out of bed. Yeah. You had no more sleeping, huh? No, that's not good. Don't get to sleep. Don't. You're funny. Don't sleep. Poor Kendall. No sleeping this morning. Look, let's see.
Morning, don't sleep.
Morning, don't sleep. Poor Kendall. So sorry.
All right, we'll go ahead and stop it there. And hopefully you got to see, that's a really great example of an excellent communication partner just trying to guide the conversation, but building in communication opportunities as she went. And what's nice about that is you can see that Kendall really started to engage a little bit more, especially when the topic was something that it seemed like something he wanted to talk about. All right, so to summarize, aided language input is going to be a strategy we use to help support language skills, and both receptively and both expressively. So what we understand and then what we can say. Now, some other kind of byproducts or things that help when we use aided language input is that it does help us choose our words better. Sometimes we have to really think about what we're saying and what we can model on the device. And of course, our system is going to be somewhat contingent upon that. So if we have a vocabulary system that doesn't have a whole lot of vocabulary, modeling may be a little bit harder. And while that's not really the focus of today's presentation, it does, when we think about modeling, it does kind of help think about what kind of AAC system and what kind of vocab file you start to use. Another byproduct of using modeling is does help us slow down. I'm guilty of this just as anybody, that sometimes we talk a little too fast and we say a lot of words, and when we have to model and use the symbols on the device while we talk, it does force us to slow down and really, again, be more thoughtful about what we're saying. Okay, so that being said, we are going to move on to communication partners. And, when we think about who's going to use aided language input, it's really going to be anybody. So all of us that are here today, everybody on your team, it doesn't matter how often we're interacting with a person using AAC. If we are interacting, we are a communication partner. So one thing to note as we go through some of these other strategies, not just modeling, but think about some of these strategies that you can take back to your teams and be able to train everybody to be a good communication partner. And one of the reasons we want to do that is because we know through the research that when a device is abandoned, 8 out of 10 times it's because of a reported lack of training and support. So if people aren't sure how to use a system or how to be a good communication partner, what could end up happening is that device does get abandoned. So that being said, us as communication partners are going to be a vital part of that success for people who use AAC. Now, we've done a little bit more research over the years as far as what are common traits of communication partners. Unfortunately, not all of them are good. As communication partners, we tend to take the most of the turns, so communication turns. We tend to ask a lot of yes-no questions, or close-ended questions where there's not a lot of choices. We frequently interrupt, so we tend to either talk over or try to interject and try to fill in that silence for those people who use AAC. Another thing that we do is focus more on the technology than the person, so thinking more about how to program the device or sort of those sorts of techie aspects versus the person using it. And then, of course, by doing this, we end up providing a limited amount of communication opportunities for the person who uses AAC. Now, on the flip side, we've also come up with common traits for people who use AAC. And what we've found, again, not all positive, we tend to find that they are passive. They limit their initiation, so they don't tend to start the conversation a whole lot. They may know more than what they can say, so this is typically like that receptive language and understanding more than what they can express. They may respond only in certain contexts, so they might need a lot of cueing in order to answer a question or to initiate. They may only communicate for a limited number of reasons. A good example that we tend to hear in AAC is that individuals are really good at requesting, but maybe not other types of functions like asking questions or social communication, things like that. Another thing that we tend to see is that they use restricted grammar. So this may be somewhat contingent upon your system as well if you don't have access to that vocabulary. But what we tend to see is it's more kind of telegraphic speech. So they're not really, conjugating verbs, using proper, labels, things like that. And that's where we see that restricted grammar. Now, what you can start to see is there's this pattern that develops between what we do as a communication partner and what our person is doing with AAC. So, for example, if we as the partner are taking the majority of the communication turns, providing limited communication opportunities, what we will see in turn is our person who uses AAC tends to be very passive. They may not initiate a conversation very often because they're kind of waiting for us to jump in and say something or give them some sort of cue. So the good news with all that, even though it's good to always reflect whether you've done this for 1 year or 10 years, kind of seeing that reflecting on what we do as communication partners, because the good news is that if we can change what we do as communication partners, we know it's going to make a direct impact on those that we're working with and those who use AAC. So for the next couple minutes, we are going to talk about other communication partner strategies. So instead of doing the things that we currently may do more than we should, we are going to do the opposite of those. And that's what we're going to talk about in more detail. Now, all of these strategies to be a good communication partner, they're all evidence-based. We know that they work. We just need to do them more often and get them more of a routine. So the first one we want to talk about is this idea of waiting and looking expectantly. Some people also call this an expectant delay, but it's that idea that when you say something or when you set up a communication opportunity, instead of interjecting with some sort of prompt or cue, you're just going to wait, and you're going to wait in silence. And sometimes that can be pretty uncomfortable, especially if we're not used to it. Some people recommend trying to count to 10. I always say that, it's good to have a starting point, but definitely read the person you're working with. If you see that they're trying to compose a message or they're looking for something on their device, give them more time, totally okay. If you see that they're, looking around the room, standing up, walking away from you, you may want to move on and maybe try a different strategy, but you're going to know your people the best, and our next video is going to show an example of that.
is right here. Let's go. What would you like for me to do?
Awesome. Okay, so I don't know if you saw at the beginning of the clip, but it did say that she had to wait 16 seconds before she saw, before that exchange happened. So this was a really good example where our communication partner did an excellent job just waiting. She was looking, but you could see where our person communicating with her system was looking. She was hunting for the word. So that's why it's okay to wait more than 10 seconds or whatever you want to set up ahead of time. Okay, so our next strategy is asking open-ended questions. So the flip side to this one that we tended to do more often than not was asking close-ended questions, where maybe we gave a binary choice, like a yes or a no, this or a that, whatever it is. Instead, what we want to try to do is flip the question to open-ended. So in our example here, instead of asking, do you want to blow bubbles, you could say, oh, bubbles, what should we do? And by doing that, we now open that opportunity to increase our language. So we could say things like open please or help me, and we could be modeling these phrases on the device. Another example, instead of asking, do you like it, you could ask, oh, well, what do you think about it? And again, this opens up some opportunity to increase our language. We now have some opportunity to model description words. So you can see where by just switching the type of question we're asking, we now open up that opportunity for language growth. Another example, instead of asking, do you want to be finished, which probably would just generate yes or no, you could say, well, what do you want to do now? And again, you can see where we have different language opportunities, and it also gives the individual who uses AAC an opportunity to take control of the situation. So in this next video example, pause this real quick. In this next video example, we're going to see Kevin, and this video is in Spanish, but we do have subtitles at the bottom. Kevin is talking about what he wants to eat. So you'll see that he starts his thought, and then you can't see Mom, but she's in the background, and you'll hear her ask an open-ended question. So she'll ask, ¿Qué comes? So what do you eat? And you'll see that Kevin's thinking about what he wants to say, and this team does a nice job not only asking him that indirect open-ended question, but they also wait for him to respond.
¿Qué comes?
Hamburguesa con queso. Hamburguesa.
Okay. Did everybody see that one okay? I guess if you haven't, let me know.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so Kim already shared our link for, thank you guys, for the script. So we will go ahead and, so we talked about active feedback. Let me play this video for you. So this is, again, a good example of just, seeing that your activity maybe doesn't go as you planned, but you have to respond anyway, and we want to respond. We don't want to just ignore those communication attempts. So this is a great example of that.
Well, you could say, I love that. Awesome. Yeah, tadpole in the egg, right? Look, what do you think? Do you think that that's awesome? That's cool? Congratulations. Well, thank you. We should say that to the frog because he laid a bunch of babies. Yeah. Oh, okay.
I had a therapist once who told me that she felt like doing active feedback was kind of like being in an improv session. So I think that his therapists and his teachers were kind of good at just responding to things off the cuff. So hopefully active feedback is something that you guys may feel, for the therapists out there, you may feel a little bit more comfortable than others to do, but definitely teaching the strategy to others can be, again, you don't even have to know the system. Anybody can respond. Anybody can provide active feedback. Okay, so our next strategy is focusing on the person. So the flip side to this that we tended to do more often was focusing on the technology. But instead we want to really think about our person. And you guys know your people the best. So you're going to know what they like, what they don't like. In our video example with Kendall, she was able to read his behavior and see that he was pretty tired. And maybe they wanted to talk about that, or he wanted to talk about that instead of whatever she wanted to talk about. So it's kind of that same idea of like, child-led activities or person-led activities, we want to follow their lead and think about what they want to talk about, because that's going to be the most meaningful. All right, so now by doing these first 4 things, what we've now done is set up the opportunity to provide more communication opportunities, and now we're ready to start modeling. Now, just like anything, we want to take a moment and think about and plan out what we want to do. Similar to that script activity, it might just be a good way to sit down and kind of mentally think about how you want to plan out these opportunities for communication, and that's totally fine. You know, once this becomes more of a routine, it'll kind of become more ingrained, but just like any new skill, you have to really start small and build into that. Another thing we want to think about is taking a walk through their day, and by there, I mean the person who uses AAC. So again, you guys know your people the best, but the other thing you have to remember is that you guys do all these things throughout the day already, whether it's at school, at home, in the community. So you really don't have to reinvent the wheel and think of new activities. Do what you're already doing, but try to think about how to embed communication opportunities and modeling into that. Okay, so I'm going to just check real quick, make sure we don't have any other questions or tech issues. Okay, we are ready to move on then to putting this into practice. So one of the next questions, or one question we get along this way, is what are we going to use to model? So 9 times out of 10, probably what you're going to use is the person's device, whether it's a high-tech system or whatever. You know, in a perfect world, I guess you could have 2 identical high-tech dynamic display devices, but that's probably not realistic. So you might just find yourself modeling on the person's device and you guys are talking together. You know, reasons why this might not be great might be if they tend to be kind of possessive of their device, or if they're putting a lot of words together. So if you notice your person is putting like 2 or 3 words together and you feel like you're interrupting them to model, this, you know, modeling on their device may not be the best choice, and you may want to think about another modality. So the second thing we could think about is using a companion app. So in the case of Saltillo, if you're using one of our dedicated devices like a NovaChat or a TouchChat Express or a Chat Fusion, you may want to think about having our companion app TouchChat, which can be, you know, available on any iPad. This gives you kind of that similar 2 high-tech devices, but one's going to be, you know, your tablet-based thing versus the dedicated. Another thing you can use is a low-tech version, and that's what this binder is here, the third picture. This is a really nice resource that we have for free on our website that you can, it comes in a PDF form, but you can print it, cut it out, assemble it, and you can even put it in sort of a binder style. That way, if you just need to pull out kind of the base vocabulary version of, like, say, word power, you can do that and you can have something to model very quickly. Our last option is the computer emulation software. So in the case of Saltillo, it's going to be our chat editor program. This is a free program anybody can use, and it mirrors those vocabulary files on the device. So if you want something to have on your computer, or if you want to project it to a smart board, this would be one way to do that you could use for modeling. Now, as far as when we want to model, as I said before, we really want to think about our person who uses AAC and kind of take a walk through their day. So think about their daily routine. Like, what are they already doing that you can start to embed communication opportunities? One activity that we can start with that is kind of like a nice starting point, especially if you're new to modeling, is this idea of shared reading. So reading books, the nice thing about books is they are very language rich. They provide a lot of vocabulary, which can be really great for growth. Most of our stories are going to be predictable and repetitive, and this is good not only for the person using AAC, but for us as the communication partner, because it gives us that constant repetition of what we can model on the device. Reading tends to occur regularly, both at home and both at school. What I like best about shared reading is that it minimizes other motor skills. So instead of having to worry about all these manipulatives and then the system and then you and the person, you can sit down together, read a book, and have your device there as well, and you're not having to coordinate so many things motorically. And of course, reading is fun. Books can take us to a new adventure every time we go there. Now, we do want to take a step back real quick and just talk about shared reading. We want to think of it more as an engagement, a fun, a learning activity. We don't want to think of our shared reading as an evaluation session. It's not a question and answer time. It's not, you know, about labeling. It's really about that interaction and that engagement using storybooks. So when you're thinking about choosing the books, you may want to think about 3 things in particular. One would be the child's interests. So what do they like? Do they like water animals? Do they like fireman, whatever it is, that's kind of the topic you want to go with. You want to think about words being, or books that are repetitious. So ones that have a lot, think about predictability, because that gives you as the communication partner a lot of opportunities to model, and then you get those multiple models throughout the book. Another thing to think about is finding words with limited text. I find this is going to be the case with a lot of our picture books, but just thinking about that just to make it easier for you as the communication partner. That way you don't have to simplify the text. Now in your handout, there's a lot of free resources out there. These are just some examples. So Tar Heel Reader is a really good one where you can download books. And if you wanted to, you'll see in some examples later on in the presentation today about how you can modify those books to match your system. But again, great examples here if you're looking for free resources. Okay, so in a video example to put this all together, we're going to see our communication partner. She's going to be doing this exact thing. So she's in a shared reading activity. She's going to be using the device and modeling. And I want you to kind of note and see if you see any other communication partner strategies that we've talked about earlier in addition to modeling. And if you see them at all, go ahead and type them in the chat window. But we'll go ahead and play this out and see how it goes.
Here, I hear a lion roaring in my ear. Lion, what do? Here, I hear a hippopotamus snorting in my ear. Hippopotamus, what do? Here, I hear a flamingo floating in my ear. Flamingo, what do? What do? Here, I hear a zebra braying in my ear. Zebra, what do? Here, I hear a boa constrictor hissing in my ear. Boa constrictor, what do? Here, I hear an elephant trumpeting in my ear. Elephant, what do? Here, I hear a leopard snarling in my ear. Leopard, what do? Here, I hear a peacock yelping in my ear. Peacock, what do? Here, I hear a walrus bellowing in my ear. Walrus, what do? Here, I hear a zookeeper whistling in my ear. Zookeeper, what do? Here, I hear children growling like a polar bear, roaring like a lion, snorting like a hippopotamus.
All right, I'm going to stop the video there. Did anybody notice any other strategies that she used other than just modeling? You can type them in the chat window if you saw them. Pausing, yeah, that was a good one. So that expectant delay, yep, she definitely did a lot of wait time. I don't know if you guys noticed too that she kind of took a step back when she waited, and I think this is a really good example of how you kind of know whether to wait longer or whether to move on. In some examples, she held off and she waited, and of course he went for the device right away and modeled and expressed that word that she was modeling. But in other cases, he was starting to kind of like pull the pages, or he was just kind of looking in another direction. So she moved on, she modeled and she moved on. So I think that's a good example. Kind of, again, you guys know your people the best, so know what works, but just know that it's going to be a pretty fluid process, and you know, you kind of have to jump in there when you see it's appropriate. Okay, so that being said, now it's your turn. We are gonna try doing modeling. This is gonna be really interesting remotely, but I'm actually gonna split my screen here because I have a board. It's actually our early books page from WordPower 60 Basic. And so what we're going to do next is give everybody an opportunity, or at least see what this looks like live. So on our next slide, we have a video reading of Brown Bear, Brown Bear. And of course, it's going to match our early books page here on the right-hand side. Now, I'm going to be modeling along with the video. And even if you didn't download and print the materials, that's okay. You can pull up the PDF and have the board out, and you can either model along with me or just, watch ahead. But this is a really good opportunity to kind of just get in that routine and that pattern of modeling. The nice thing is we don't have to read the story, so we've taken that component out of it. So if you're new to modeling, you may just want to model one word like I or see. I think Mom was modeling you. If you are a little bit, I don't know, if you're feeling a little brave and want to put two words together, you could do a phrase like I see. Or you could do turn the page. So do whatever you feel comfortable with, but we're going to go ahead and play the first portion of this video.
Okay, let's read Brown Bear, what do you see? Brown Bear, what do you see? Look, there's the brown bear. I see a red bird looking at me. Where is that red bird? I wonder, we probably need to turn the page. There he is. Red bird, what do you see? I see a yellow duck looking at me. Where is that yellow duck? Let's turn the page to find out. Oh, there he is. Okay, let's read. Yellow duck, what do you see? I see a blue horse looking at me. Where's that blue horse? Need to turn the page.
I am going to pause here real quick because I just want to reinforce, because I sometimes get this question a lot. You do notice that as we're reading the story, we're not necessarily modeling every single word that she's reading. So if she says a full sentence, I might just model one word out of that. And that's totally okay. I think when we think about how our individuals are using the device, they may only be using one word at a time. So we want to meet them at that level. But regardless, we also want you as the communication partner to feel comfortable with that. So if you're only modeling one word at a time, that's okay. You could be saying a full sentence, but only model one word, and that is great. Okay, here we go.
There he is. I see him. Okay, let's read. Blue horse, what do you see? He says, I see a green frog looking at me. Where's that green frog? Turn the page. There he is. Let's read and see what he sees. Green frog, what do you see? He says, I see a purple cat looking at me. Where's that purple cat?
I'll tell you what, before we get to the purple cat, we're going to stop there, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more before we switch gears. So hopefully everybody got a chance. If you didn't get a chance to model, at least to kind of follow along with the video, and you can see kind of how easy that was just to model with our theme-based board. Now, speaking of which, while we're using this early books page, like you saw with our board here, this is our early books page from WordPower 60 Basic, that is a really nice starting point if you're getting used to modeling or it's kind of a new approach. But we also want to make sure that we move on and know that you can model on a larger core word board to achieve the same results. And so again, while you're trying to get the routine, it's totally okay to go with those theme-based boards. But one takeaway I want you guys to know is that you don't have to be stuck on that forever. And you definitely shouldn't be. Over time, it's going to be a lot easier to learn one large vocab set than it will be a bunch of theme-based pages. And we want to make sure too that we're able to generalize what we communicate. So if we think about words that we can use across our storybook reading, these are just some examples. So words like what, or read, or look. I could model across a variety of books, and I don't have to do that necessarily on a theme-based page. So this screenshot is an example of the next board we're going to use, which is our 88 core word tell me board. And this is great because it gives us opportunity now to model a variety of language, not just with our storybook activity, but across different settings and different activities. So if we think about words that we were just using, or if we want to think back to our story that we read, you can start to see as you scan through these words, maybe some things that you could already model. So I'm going to pose that to you guys. What words do you see on this board that might be good to model for our same Brown Bear book? Go ahead and type them in the chat window. And if you're not familiar with this, that's okay. It might take a little bit of scanning. There are 88 words on here. Yep, somebody's saying what, see. Yeah, those are really good. And you probably saw those. They might, I'm not sure if they were on our early books page or not, but you can start to see a little bit more flexibility. So if I look at some of the examples, yep, these are great examples, guys. See, I, read, turn, exactly. These are all words that we can model not only with our storybook page, but then as we go throughout the day, we can model that vocabulary as well. So that's really the big goal. We want to get familiar with modeling, and sometimes that can be achieved by using a theme book page. But eventually what we want to try to do is get into the actual system and model words where they're already at, whether that's a core board like this, whether it's a dynamic display system like WordPower. We want to get really comfortable with that so we can generalize that language. So that being said, we are going to flip over, or if you didn't print it, you're going to go to the second page of our board. And this is going to be the 88 core tell me board that we just saw on the previous slide. So we're going to pick back up with our video. Let me split my screen here. Get my board figured out. We are going to try this again, but this time we're going to be modeling on the core board page. So just some of those examples that you gave me, if you want to model those, if this is new to you, you might just model the word see or turn for turn the page. If you're feeling brave, you could put it into a phrase again. So maybe again, we could do I see or turn it for turn the page. So do whatever feels comfortable, but we're going to pick back up and try to model with the video again. I believe we were on the purple cat, so we got him or her.
Page and find him. Oh, there he is. A purple cat? That is silly. I have not seen a purple cat before. Let's read the words. Purple cat, what do you see? I see a white dog looking at me. Where is that white dog? Turn the page. There he is. I see the white dog too. Let's read. It says, white dog, what do you see? And the white dog says, I see a black sheep looking at me. Let's turn the page and find that black sheep. Oh, there he is. Black sheep, what do you see? Let's read what the black sheep sees down here. I see a goldfish looking at me. A goldfish? That's a silly thing for a sheep to see. Let's turn the page and see if it really is a goldfish. Oh, sure enough, there he is. All right, let's read and see what he knows or what he sees. Goldfish, what do you see? I wonder. He says, I see a teacher looking at me. A teacher? That's silly. Let's turn the page and find the teacher. There she is. Let's read. It says, teacher, what do you see? Teacher says, I see children looking at me. Oh my goodness, I wonder how many children. Where are those kids? We have to turn the page to find out. Look! I see children too. Let's read. There's a few more words up here. Children, children, what do you see? It doesn't tell us. So unless you know, we're going to have to turn the page to find out. Let's turn the page. Oh, they're stuck. There we go. Whoa! Look at all of those animals. They say, we see a brown bear, a red bird, a yellow duck, a blue horse, a green frog, a purple cat, a white dog, a black sheep, a goldfish, and one more, a teacher looking at us. That's what we see. Oh my goodness, that was a lot of animals.
All right, we'll go ahead and stop our video there. Hopefully you guys got a chance to, again, if you didn't get a chance to model, to at least follow along with the video. One thing you'll note, especially if the core word page is new to you, that some people might have thought that the core word page might be a little bit harder. But again, over time, if you're modeling on the same board across different contexts, it actually would become easier. So kind of keep that in mind as you're taking that to your teams. I'm going to check real quick just to see if we have any other questions. And Kim, let me know if I missed any questions I might have. Okay, so let's go back to this and summarize kind of what we've done. So again, thinking about how we can start to use modeling and make it more of a routine, we do want to practice first. And normally what I recommend, especially to families that are new to this, is to really get that device out and practice. So if you are trying a new activity or a book, maybe get that device out and practice finding those words. And maybe you only pick 1 or 2 target words per book, just like Mom did in that polar bear example. If you have a book that has a lot of text in it, you may want to simplify those words. And then, of course, you want to follow your person's lead. So whatever they kind of initiate, kind of roll with that. And then make sure you're using some of those strategies you did before by waiting to have them or allowing them to have a turn. Okay, before we get to the very end, tell you what, I'm going to save that question to the end. But thank you for reminding me of that, Kim. All right, so some other tips and tools just to kind of wrap this up. You probably noticed in our storybook example that there were symbols actually taped inside the book. If you wanted to achieve the same visual strategy, you could use our chat editor program, which I mentioned before. Not only does it give you that access to all the different vocabulary, but it allows you to screenshot and print out those symbols that you're targeting. Now, if you don't necessarily have the symbols, but you just want a reminder that this is a word you have to model, you could just use a sticky note and place it over that word. I've seen some other people suggest just having the sticky note on the page somewhere with the word written, so it's kind of up to you, whatever is going to be a reminder for you. Some other cool things to get started include using poster-sized communication boards. Again, this is something we have for free on our website, saltillo.com, that you can go to and print. And you can see 2 different versions. On the left-hand side, it has more of like a hide-show vocab version where not everything is exposed. And then on the right-hand side is the full vocabulary. All right, so just like any new strategy, you want to dream big and think of all the possibilities of where you can go, but you do want to start small because while modeling sounds really easy and may look really easy in the video, it's definitely not once you put it into practice. So, reflect on that and just know that it's going to be kind of a messy journey, and that's totally okay. But most importantly, we do want to act now. So with that being said, I'm going to open it up for other questions. I see we have a few coming in, so we can wrap that up. Okay, so the question is, can you please guide me about the prompt hierarchy required to help the child navigate the device? Okay, so I probably have more questions for this. In general, we have prompting that we can use, as far as like, a verbal prompt, but I'm wondering if you're talking about prompts in general or specifically how to navigate a device, because I'd probably answer differently. So I don't know if you can clarify for me. Okay, and then there was a question about materials. There should be 6 different materials. If you don't have that, I believe that we do email them as well. I don't know if you know, Kim, do we email the materials as well afterwards?
Yes, they should be in the handout that they get an hour after the presentation.
Okay, so you should be able to see those if you didn't see them in the control panel. One thing to note too when it comes to kind of thinking about your question about navigating the device, Okay, so that's more, the question is more about how to navigate the device. You know, it really does depend on your device. They're all going to be organized a little bit different, which is why, you know, there are so many out there. A lot of the times, especially if you're thinking about a high-tech system, it is a dynamic display, so every time you hit a button, it's going to change. I wouldn't necessarily say that there's a prompt hierarchy for that. I think some of it just comes down to exposure and just being comfortable, you know, kind of exploring, making mistakes, and finding those words. Okay, for example, to reach, eat, red apple. Okay, so again, I think that kind of comes down to your device. I think that if you're using like a word power, for example, eat is going to be on your home page, and then it takes you directly to those words. But again, I think that it really is a matter of just being comfortable with the device. I know for some families, what I've done is we'll come up with, when we think about modeling, especially within a certain activity, is I'll actually have them write on a Post-it note, like what are 5 words that you want to teach in this activity or model. And then what we'll literally go through before we even do the activity or practice the activity, that role play, is I'll have them find those words and find that pathway to the word that they're looking for. So in your example, if the target word is eat, we will look for that together and say, okay, how many buttons, like where is that word located, and really get used to that motor plan. That way they can memorize that pathway. Because anything you can do, especially for high-tech devices, to kind of reduce those demands is really going to be helpful. Another thing to think about, since we have a few more minutes, is you could create a visual strategy for them, so kind of a mapping. Depending on the device you're looking at, like with our chat editor program, you can actually create a pathway to a word. That way it's kind of like a mapping to help anybody find that word. So if they're not familiar with the system, they can look and see, like, first I hit this one, then this picture to get that word. So I don't know if that, hopefully that kind of helps a little bit, or at least gives you a direction. If anybody else has any other questions, go ahead and type them in. But at this point, I appreciate you guys taking out your afternoon to come and hang out and do the modeling and all that. And hopefully this gives you some ideas on where to go next with your teams. So with that, I am actually going to open up, let's see, I'm going to try to open up Chat Editor real quick, because we do have about 30 more seconds here. Oh, and actually, okay, we have one question. Can you post the link for the downloads for the boards? Absolutely. Kim, do you happen to have that readily available? Oh, there we go. She's so fast. Yeah, the boards are really great. We have a lot of them for word power. So the examples you saw here with the early books pages, but if you just want the core vocabulary to match up, it's a really good resource to have. And a lot of classrooms I've seen where they'll actually assemble that book, that low-tech binder, and they'll have that just to pull out whether they have somebody on the device or if they just need a quick, robust vocab system. It's a really good opportunity. Oh, good. And Kim also posted the link for the Tell Me program, which was created by Carol Zangari. So it's a really great collaborative program that's out there. All right, guys. I'm going to pull up Chat Editor real quick. So if you guys want to see this real quick, you can. And actually, if you want to learn more about Chat Editor, you're welcome to.
Welcome to Chat Editor.
There she is. You're welcome to go on. I believe there's another webinar that just focuses on Chat Editor and shows you how to make things, and it's really super fun. So this is just one example you can see where I can actually screenshot those words.
Eat. Cheese.
So then you can copy those, print them however you see fit. You can print them into a book like you saw, but it's really up to you. Sky's the limit. It is 2 o'clock. We are on the hour. So again, thank you guys for coming. If you have other questions, I'm going to stick around for a second, but enjoy the rest of your week.